Self-reflection became my compass. And intellectually, depth brings you clarity. Scattered thoughts came together. They didn't clash, they coalesced.
Before I begin, let me ask you a simple question. You don't have to say anything, just a simple raise of hands. How many of you feel life is moving faster than you can fully process it? Thank you. You may put your hands down. We live in a world that celebrates speed. More work, more goods, more visibility. But there is something that we rarely talk about. Depth. Depth is the quality of being intense, not spectacle. It's not about doing things, many things, but it's about going deeper. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "It's not the length of life, but the depth." And this applies to life far beyond itself. It applies to how we learn, how we work, how we build relationships, and how we respond in life when it becomes difficult. Today, most of us, the average person, uses 7 hours a day on the screens. And yet, most of us keep complaining we have less time than ever. By the way, I am Saketh Supraz Kancherla, a mental skills trainer, a writer, and I do come from a business background. I'm not here today to give you advice, but here to share you what I did through life. This talk has nothing to do with my guidance. There's something important I've come to notice. Most of us are living life on the surface, and the problem with that surface is its turbulence. That's where the noise is. That's where attention is scattered. And that's where competition is crowded. When you live life horizontally, everything is fine until it doesn't. And it's not because people lack talent, because there's no depth to anchor them. And when the storms do arrive, which they inevitably do, shallow roots don't hold. Most of us are building the future based on the speed of the moment, and then complain why things are unstable. Yet, in this context, it's often misunderstood. It is not the measurement of distance, it is the measurement of intensity. And innovation isn't born from moving fast, it's born by getting deeper. We are by far the most connected generation of human history, and yet most of us are struggling with preference. We scroll through ideas, skim through experiences, and move on quickly. We are everywhere at once, which means we are rarely fully anywhere. We know a little bit about everything, but very little about one thing. Feels with life, the skimming to the surface of our own lives here. I've come to notice an important thing. The people who do last for a long time don't do more, they do less but deep. That choice of consistently choosing quality over quantity is what gives them, and I come to recognize it as an invisible advantage. I call it the deliberate depth. Think of an iceberg. What you see above the surface is only a fraction of what holds its head. The real mass, the real strength is beneath the waterline. Success works the same way. What the visible world applauds to is just visible to the eye. And what reshapes the one is what nobody sees. That's why I call it the invisible advantage. Deliberate depth for me shows up in 3 core areas. Depth of intent. Why I move. Depth of commitment. Why I show up. And depth of growth. How I evolve. I will walk you through each one of them today. Let me begin with the first. Depth of intent. Didn't come naturally to me. 5 or 6 years earlier, my life was full. Busy, social, always moving. If you had asked me why I was doing what I was doing, I didn't have a clear answer.
My life was moving on momentum, not on meaning. My days were full, but direction was missing. Nothing was wrong, but nothing felt deeply. The shift began when I started asking myself better questions. What actually gave me energy? What drains it? And what do I do well without forcing it? I began to notice life, not dramatically, but deliberately. That through self reflection, through feedback, and through honest self criticism, that gave me an answer. Speaking, writing, and explaining ideas so that people understand them. That came naturally to me. Therefore, self reflection became my compass, not because I planned it, but because I started noticing it. Depth is not only what you think about, you feel depth. Physically, it feels grounding, like you've been anchored to something larger than your life. And emotionally, depth moves you, not dramatically, but honestly. And intellectually, depth brings you clarity. Scattered thoughts came together. They didn't clash, they coalesced. When intent lacks depth, energy leaks everywhere. And when intent has depth, effort begins to be lighter. You may move slower than others, but then you begin to move straighter, which reminds me of my alma mater's motto, nec dextrosum, nec sinistrosum, neither to the left nor to the right, on straight on. Now intent becomes clear, and then the real test begins. This brings me to the second area, depth of commitment. I used to think commitment and motivation were the same, but motivation comes and goes. If motivation were reliable, none of us would need alarm clocks today. Commitment is what remains after motivation leaves, but depth comes at a cost. You begin to say no more often. You begin to disappoint a lot of people who were comfortable with the older version of you. And as I said, you begin to move slower, and sometimes you start to wonder if you're falling behind. Depth does not look impressive in the short term, but it builds you something stronger, peace that you can stand on. Depth also changes how you relate to people. You begin to listen more carefully and react less impulsively. You stop trying to impress and start trying to understand. People admire brilliance, but what they trust is consistency, and that comes from the depth of commitment. But intent and commitment aren't enough. Life keeps changing, which means we must too. I used to see knowledge as something to finish, and then I started seeing knowledge as something to wear. For a long time, I thought growth was about adding more skills, more techniques, more expertise, until COVID happened. Life slowed down. Inside me,
At the time, I had information, I had qualifications. What I didn't have was the answer. Learning that I had accumulated over a long time helped me only solve problems and work, but didn't give me answers to questions about life, uncertainty, fear, etc. That's when I realized something very different. And life broke me learning very until I relearned how to learn. For the first time, I turned to books, not to escape, but to cope. A dear friend of mine suggested a few, and he gave me one rule. Don't rush, absorb fully before you move on to learn. And that principle changed my life forever. I stopped reading to finish. I began reading to practice, one idea at a time, testing in conversations, applied in decisions, and reflecting on why it should be. Learning stopped being about information. Learning became transformative. It changed the way I noticed the world, even the way I watch films or interpreted people's choices. Learning became deliberate. And recently, at an airport, I picked a book. And I remembered something very clearly. That friend was reading books like this back in school, And I laughed about that and said, "Hey bro, let's click, let's chill." And standing there with the airport years later, and come to realize he wasn't smarter than me. He was just earlier. 12 years earlier in understanding what deep learning can do. Yeah, I didn't feel regret that. I felt myself because growth is not about catching up. It's about going deep when you bottom. Yeah, or growth is not about how much you consume. It's about how much you absorb. Learning without practice comes with an expiry. But when you absorb deeply, it reshapes how you respond when life demands more than just skill. I'm reminded of a quote on the moving rock. It ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you get it and keep moving forward. 12 days ago, I sat at night outside cold, lay at midnight in the hospital, in a critical doctor. He was put on a ventilator. He was fighting for his life. And then, I was watching like a at the stand. There was no room for performance, no room to speak, no room for nothing. Only that is what it says in idea. No outcome, no object, no cause. Not very fully. My dad was admitted in the hospital. Somewhere between hospital and the hospital comes one ward to the other. I stood there prepared for the stop. Not out of ambition, but out of sheer commitment. Because depth of commitment is showing up in life does not make sense at all. Those days taught me something about growth as well. Growth was no more about learning more qualifications, it became about how we evolve. To be our present son, an anchor partner, and very quickly learning how to be a public father. I must say this very clearly. A son, a father, a black there, resting, recovering, and sleep. That I think is great for me. Those days gave me something else. It taught me that inner ability, stability, is not built in the moment of crisis. It is borrowed from the depth you built long before the moment of crisis, right? I was not strong. I was grounded. That grounding is steady with depth. When lived long enough, that becomes the most important legacy, resilience. Today, I'm not going to tell what you tell with depth with you, because if I define it for you, you'd copy it. But ask yourself, where in your life it truly speed when depth might serve you well? The world will always bring you a competitive world. The ones who truly stand out are not the thousands. They carry an advantage, a quiet edge that does not announce itself. And when you have deliberate depth up your sleeve, you have the quiet advantage, a cutting edge. Not because you run ahead of others, but because you begin to go deeper. Choosing depth does not mean escaping the world. It means staying whole in an age full of distraction. And in a world that keeps changing, what reshapes tomorrow is not noise or speed. It is depth, chosen, deliberate, 90